Hallo liebe Zuschauer, herzlich willkommen.
Hello everyone and welcome back. In my first video, we've learned that horses react based on natural reflexes and therefore don't need to be trained for years or be conditioned for certain movements. I've called these movements the letters of a common language with a horse. These letters or exercises are also the basis for communicating with a herd of horses. The language itself is not about giving orders, it's the movement that allows us to communicate. In moving together, we are able to transmit emotions and intentions. Moshe Feldenkrais once mentioned awareness through movement. This applies to a herd of horses as well. This video is about how we can communicate with a herd of horses at liberty. In a herd, the different members of a herd interact. These interactions can be a source of conflicts or a source of harmony. Harmony is characterized by synchronized movements of all herd members and mutual respect. When you're riding with a herd, each of the herd members has their role to play and needs to show initiative much more than when you're riding just one horse. Each of the horses is responsible for their own position and actions. Horses are able to assume these responsibilities much more than you might think. For example, my two competing stallions never cease to amaze me because they're so enthusiastic in our group exercises, but if I'd leave them alone, they'd be attacking each other immediately. The easiest form of working with a herd is ponying a horse. It is actually nothing more than doing groundwork with one or more horses on horseback. Both the riding horse and the pony horse, or the pony horses, need some basic skills in order for this to work. Let me show you how I go about this. If you want your horses to move parallel to each other, they need not only a common language, but also understand instructions from a point behind their shoulder, the third position. Here you see me next to Engallado in the third position. I've highlighted the axis of my shoulders on my shirt for you in red. The third position is key for working with a pony horse or with a group of horses. It doesn't matter whether I'm on the ground or on horseback, my body language is exactly the same. The third position also allows for a greater distance to the horse and more speed, and it enables us to synchronize our movements on the vertical and horizontal axis. Any change of direction, rotation, raising through the withers, or even just moving one part of the body can be mirrored by the horse. He will try to keep his shoulders parallel to our shoulders, his hips parallel to our hips, his hind hooves parallel to our feet, and his front legs parallel to our arms. In bird's eye view, you'll see what I mean. Still in the third position, I straighten up and raise my shoulders. The horse will raise through the withers also. His movement becomes more expressive and noble. When I relax my shoulders, he also relaxes his shoulders and neck, and his movement becomes more even and relaxed. When I shorten my steps, he shortens his. When I put my weight on my heels, he'll put more weight on his hind end. If you've watched my first video, you may have noticed that I use the flexion points and movement lines also for the third position, but in reverse order, from back to front. The horse doesn't mind. A general rule of thumb: any point along either the blue or the yellow line reinforces the movement that's linked to it. Up until now, We've started at the flexion point of the neck and went down the blue line to make the horse yield or do shoulder in. When I'm in the third position, I can't reach the flexion point on the neck, so I have to use the one behind the horse's elbow. When I stimulate this area, I'll create a bend in the horse's body and make him look in my direction. If I turn my shoulders now, I create a lateral movement on top of that. If I want to do shoulder in with my horse from the third position, I'll follow the blue line from the inner hind hoof upwards. The axis of my shoulders corresponds to the axis of my horse's shoulders. When we look at the yellow line, we've mostly used it from the first position or from in front of the horse. If you remember, open shoulder for inviting the horse's hind end, closed shoulder for the travers. You can, of course, do the same exercise in the third position. Here I'm twisting my hips to the inside and Engayado copies me. Our feet are parallel to each other. So with these elements, combining the movements along the two lines, you'll be able to create more complex sets of movements. It's the best feeling in the world when you're able to define your horse's direction, speed, posture and grade of collection at liberty, just with body language. Let's look at the third position from bird's eye view. We are parallel to the horse and behind the smiley face on his shoulder. Just like when I'm riding, you'll say, and you're right. The third position on the ground uses the same techniques as the rider on horseback. On horseback, I can only reach the second flexion point, which is right under my thigh. Any stimulation of this area can lead to flexion. For example, if I move my knee towards my outer hand, or if I move my heel, or tiny vibrations such as the sound made by a dressage whip hitting my shoe. You can see that Engayado is naturally drawn to this stimulation and moves his head. When I'm stimulating the flexion point during riding, you can see how the horse reacts by bending his body. If I turn my shoulder to the inside, my horse also turns his shoulders to the inside. If I drop my inner shoulder, he'll do the same. Moving my shoulder in direction of the inner hind hoof, following the blue line, or up and to the outside, following the yellow line, gives the horse an indication of which movement I expect him to produce. In the first film, I've called these movements yielding and closeness. In dressage riding, they are better known as shoulder in and travers. Let me illustrate the movements by exaggerating. Here I'm turning my shoulders in the opposite direction, along the yellow line, and he's mirroring me just as well. And so we're doing travers or haunches in. If we combine the two axes of the shoulders for shoulder in and haunches in, we'll create collection. Collection means more strength and expression but also slows the horse down and can be used as a brake when riding without a bridle. When we are riding, the rule of thumb is the classical riding rule: shoulders parallel to shoulders, hips parallel to hips. This motto should actually apply to all parts of the body. It should be toes parallel to toes, eyes parallel to eyes, belly button parallel to belly button, and so forth. To illustrate this, I've moved my inner ear towards my shoulder, and you may be able to see that Engaillado does the same. This is a useful aid for riding travers. More advanced horses are able to mirror their rider's movements vertically as well. For instance, if you suck your belly button inside, the horse will do the same. If you lift your shoulders, the horse will raise through the withers. If you drop your shoulders, he'll drop his shoulders, and his movements will get more relaxed and with a lower attitude. The more you can get your horses to mirror your movements, the easier it is for working with them as a herd. Here we see Koyu, a jumpy and insecure horse who has arrived at my stables just a week ago from Spain. He is very reactive to all kinds of movements behind his head and on his back, so I'm preparing him for a rider as a pony horse. At first he's a bit shy around Hugin, who's quite a big horse, but then he follows my invitation with a gesture just as he's already practiced. You can see that Hugin is very polite and moves a bit to the side to give Koyu more space. Working with a pony horse involves the same exercises as working from the ground, whether at a standstill or at a walk. Hugin is a mature riding horse. He feels that Koyu is nervous and tries to stand extra calm to show him that there's no need to be anxious. I gesture towards the yellow line to invite Koyu to come closer, and he reacts promptly. He manages to stay calm and relaxed in between my requests now. He is copying both Hugin's attitude and energy. Now, I'll point at the blue line and ask him to yield. It only takes a few minutes and I'm able to direct Koyu just as well as from the ground. As a pony horse, Koyu has the opportunity to watch what the rider is doing on horseback and copy Hugin's relaxed and calm attitude. He's visibly trying hard to stay in tune with Hugin. When riding curves, the horse on the inside has to slow down and wait for the horse on the outside. I'm using the yellow line to indicate this. Yielding also works much better and relaxed after a few tries. Hugin, as the riding horse, acts like my inner thigh in this situation. Ponying is a great way to provide the future riding horse with a reassuring presence of a more experienced horse that he can learn from. Here we see Carlson, who is 3 years old. He started school a few weeks earlier than Koyu. But unlike Koyu, he's not shy at all. He's actually really self-confident. The world should yield when he comes and not vice versa in his opinion. He's grudgingly had to accept that when working as a group, he's not the one to make the rules. By now, he's understood that he has to yield to the blue line and to the riding horse, at a standstill as well as in movement. Here he's waiting for me to point down the yellow line so that he can move closer instead of just making room for himself. For him this is just a game, but actually he's learning the basics of lateral movement. He is paying attention where to put his feet and succeeds at being as accurate as a young dancer. At a trot, I help the pony horse by pointing down the blue line when he's on the outside and the yellow line when he's on the inside, so that he'll wait for the other horse. With a little bit of practice, the horses understand that they have to adapt their speed and wait for each other. They're much better than us in these things. If you've taken part in a quadrille, you know what I'm talking about. Once the pony horse has understood the rules for working with a group and knows how to synchronize with the others, you can give him tasks of his own. Carlson can't wait. Today he's going to learn to walk a circle around the riding horse by himself. To facilitate the learning process, I put a halter and a rope on him. I pass the rope under the neck of my riding horse and hold it with my outer hand. With a whip, I lightly tap Carlson on the blue line, which is his signal to go. At first, he doesn't understand and comes even closer. I have to put a bit more emphasis in my request for him to take off. I accompany him by pointing down the blue line with my whip. When he reaches Hugin's other side, I invite him back to his spot by pointing down the yellow line. The second round goes much smoother. Carlson finds his spot next to Hugin and enjoys being praised for the good job. Once he's understood the exercise, I can take off the halter. When working with a herd of horses, I usually call out each horse's name at the beginning of the exercise and add a particular voice signal for each movement on top of body language. This makes it easier communicating with each individual of a larger herd. Carlson thinks that he's been the pony horse for long enough. Now he wants to be the riding horse. For hopping on either from a mounting block or, like here, from another horse, the yellow line gives us the tools to invite the horse to park. Carlson lacks experience as a riding horse, and so I use 2 dressage whips, each in one hand, to help him find the yellow and the blue line. The whips enable me to give the horse's neck the required bend. The outer whip points horizontally forward, the inner whip helps stimulate the flexion point behind his elbow. That way the young riding horse learns to find his balance under the rider without constraints around the head. Such a good boy, the little Carlson. To conclude, let me give you some ideas for your own choreography with your horses. Here, for instance, we have the circle exercise that we did with Carlson, but with a few more horses. You could also have the pony horses circle in opposite directions. If you ask the horse to yield only his hind end, he'll turn around and you'll be able to work in the first position. Body language enables us to have all horses adopt the same degree of collection or move laterally as a group. Only sometimes one of the horses decides to go do his own thing. I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and if you'd like to see more of those, I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel. See you soon!